Hey everyone. Well, I'm Ali, yes, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about burnout and about how to treat your contributors in open source projects. Um, I work a lot in the Rust project, so if you see this question mark somewhere, that's me. And just hit me up if you want to know anything about Rust or open source or my opinions and stuff. Obviously, this entire talk is going to be slightly biased because well, the thing about burnout is if you're still here, you have survivorship bias. If I'm missing anything, feel free to tell me. I'm always happy to learn more and to know where I'm having things that I don't know yet. So the plan for today is that I'm going to talk a little bit about research, give a bunch of anecdotes about my open source work, and then I'm going to draw parallels between these two sections. So this first part is going to be a little bit dark because there's lots of things that are going wrong, but I'm going to move into the good things that are happening right now and things that are planned in the future that are going to make everything much better. So without further ado, let's start with research. I mean, research generally is the idea that you have an idea and you pursue it and you write down what you did so that others don't have to repeat your work and everybody's happy. Sometimes you go even to the level that you think about writing a PhD, then it's a little bit more complex. You still have an idea. You find a professor who likes your idea. You do your PhD, you finish your PhD, and then everybody profits. Well, not so fast. When you're doing this kind of work in research, most of the time you're not spending working on your idea, you're spending it on teaching, grading, finding funding for yourself, and don't read all that. It's just to show like there's so many other things, and the tiny thing at the bottom that's actually working on your own topic. And I mean, I love teaching and I love doing most of these things here, but they just take away time from what you originally planned to do. And so at some point, you're going to decide you need more time. So you're going to start working after hours, you're going to start working weekends. And well, anybody ever heard of burnout? Well, outside of psychology, in academia, burnout doesn't exist by definition, because that's how math works. You define it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist. I talked with a bunch of people about this topic at the university itself. And I had a bunch of quotes here before, but they were so awful, I decided they're not worth repeating. But the general gist is that there's a lot of people who think the system is actually the right way to do it, and they are just propagating this. And there's this problem where a lot of people have like the success story of their own way of doing a lot of work, and they're proudly telling you how they worked Saturdays and Sundays, and that this is the right way to do it, and kind of forgetting again the survivorship bias and similar things. So in general, science isn't always a pretty ivory tower that it might appear from the outside. There's lots of hard work happening there too, and lots of people who at some point can't continue with that. So in general, not everyone finishes their thesis, and I started looking into how many people are this actually. Wanted to look a bit into the details, and luckily people were doing research on that. So I found the dropout rate for Germany. People were collecting this data over like 15 years to find out how many people are dropping out that actually started a PhD. And if you're doing an independent PhD, meaning you're working at a company and you're just connected to the university by doing the PhD there, having like a professor who mentors you, then it's actually 1/4 of the people will drop out during their PhD. If you're employed, it's a little bit better. And if you have a stipend, then you can spend most of your time working on your PhD, and you also have a higher success rate. Of course, this is cool data, but never trust data that you did not falsify yourself. With this data that was collected, there's a small problem, which is we don't really know the number of unreported cases. And the number of unreported cases would in this case be people who never registered that they started their PhD. And this might seem like a rare thing, but in practice, it's your first year, you don't register your thesis. And in some cases, I've heard of people having it registered after 4 years. Some people finish their thesis in 4 years, and some people haven't even registered a thesis in the first 4 years. They're trying to improve this, but still we don't have any good data yet on this. So we don't really know how many additional people are dropping out here. So in general, we know like that people are not just dropping out because of the amount of work. There's also other topics, but I'm actually ignoring all of these right here, and we're just talking about the overwork part. There's other problems in research, but for now, let's just switch back to open source, which was the other topic I want to talk about. Just a short notice. I started working on open source for around 10 years ago, but earnestly only since like 2016, when I joined the Rust project and dove into the Rust compiler, and all these little crabs just grabbed me and kept me there. And now I'm stuck in the Rust compiler and never leaving it again. And I love it. And this gets us to the point. I'm still in the Rust compiler. So reminder, everything that I'm telling you here is coming through the lens of someone who is still around. But it also means I've seen a lot of people come and go. In general, when you're contributing to an open source project, it's similar how you do research. You have an idea, you implement it, you open a pull request, you get a review, your reviews get addressed, and then the thing is merged and everybody's happy because you made a new change and everything is really cool. But again, not so fast. The reality is often a little bit different because people need to review your PR, and reviewing costs time. And considering that most workdays are 8 hours or sometimes more, and according to research, 6 hours is the most time that you can actually be effective on a day. All the rest is where your brain is essentially already shutting down and not doing anything productive anymore. You have to clean up all the work that you do after that on the next day. And even though this is the amount of work that can be done, you might be wondering, why is my pull request not getting reviewed? I mean, there's more than enough time to review your pull request. Well, most people do their open source work after hours. So they've already spent 8 hours or more. They've eaten up all their effective hours a day. And then after work, they might get through a few reviews or might get some work done in open source, but they're already drained. Let's be honest. And then some people start grabbing their weekends and all their vacations. And at some point, all you're doing is working, open source, and sleeping, eating, or something. So you might be thinking, well, if all these reviewers are already so busy, one solution would be I help them. I become a reviewer. I'm going to save these maintainers some time, and I'm just going to do this not just out of the openness of my own heart. I'm going to do this because in this way, if there's more time, they can review my pull requests, right? You guessed it, not so fast. The problem is if you add more reviewers to a project, you have a similar situation like when you add another lane to a highway. I mean, I'm joking, but like there is a correlation here. If you have an actively reviewed project where lots of reviewers are getting through pull requests, that just means at some point, more people are going to be interested in contributing because they opened the pull request and the pull request got reviewed, and that's exciting, and they can open a new pull request. And this basically scales with the number of reviewers that you have and the time that the reviewers have that they can contribute. And reviewers aren't just around once they join a project. Sometimes they also leave. And I've noticed this a lot, that a lot of people joined the project, did a lot of work in both in pull requests and in reviews, and after around 6 months or 9 months, they leave again. And sometimes this is because their life circumstances changes, but sometimes it's also because they had the wrong expectations going in. I made a nice, pretty little subjective graph. At the bottom, you can see the timeline. These are basically months. And on the y-axis, you can see the number of contributions people are doing per month. So if you have an expectation of how much you're going to be contributing, you might think you're ramping it up slowly, and then you reach a nice state and you're steady there. This is the blue line here. The reality is a little bit different, because most of the time you get really excited about your work and you start doing as much as possible and you ramp it up like really hard, and then you hit like a limit, and that's just like your personal limit or whatever the limit is, and then you crash and burn and end up not contributing at all, or going back to a lower level and maybe catching back up. I've seen some people catch back up, get to the normal levels. I've seen people who do this burnout like just once a year and keep doing it over and over. We would have better data than my subjective little graph here, but it's really hard to analyze. So we don't know that much about how it is really. But from what I've talked with people and from what I've experienced myself, this is pretty much a problem. So similar to research, there are some situations where you start something and you leave again, and these similarities are what made me hold this talk today. I made a list of the specific ones that stand out to me, which is both research and open source are really exciting, because you usually only get into them if you're really loving the topic that you want to address. And if you publish in research, or if you get a pull request merged in open source, this is really rewarding. And people are maybe citing your research, or other people are referencing the work you did. And this is just a lot of fun, and you want to do more of it, but you never, ever will have enough time to do everything you want, both in research and in open source. And some of this time you're waiting on others, maybe to deliver the data that you need in research, or maybe to do a pull request that you're depending on in open source. And at the same time, it's also the opposite. Maybe you're providing something that others are waiting on. And in general, a lot of people are burning out in both of these regions, just because they love so much what they do. They want to do all of it and so much of it. And at some point, it's just too much. So enough of all this darkness, let's fix it. I mean, there must be solutions to this, and people have done better, and some people are doing better than other people. So there's something that we must be able to do. And the problem is, if you talk to enough people, like you talk to 10 people, you get 12 opinions on how to fix it. But now that I've talked with a lot of people about this, I found that there's basically 3 things that everything boils down to. And these 3 things are time, money, and resources, in no particular order. And so let's address each of these once at a time. The easiest one is resources. Resources can be anything from somebody sponsoring you to get a big computer that runs your system, your open source project, or it might be somebody giving you access to a big cloud computing platform to run your research experiments. And sometimes it's that you get specific hardware. If you're an embedded developer, there might be some really exotic hardware that you would like to run your embedded project on. And sometimes companies give them out like candy. If you're on a big conference, sometimes companies send them to you so you can show that you're working on their hardware. So these things are already happening. And other things that are happening are, for example, continuous integration with GitHub Actions, or all these CI web pages that you can use to run your Git project on. These are provided for open source projects, most of the time for free, and sometimes with a lot of resources, actually. Recently, there's also been projects popping up where you can actually work for free on a cloud platform on your project, as long as it's an open source project. So there's a lot of things happening, and these are really good things, but you can always have more resources, in the sense of sometimes the resources that are available are not the ones that you need. So this is just some specific ones that are something that I often encounter. The other topic is time. If you're working in an open source project and somebody opens an issue and is like, hey, if I use these 20 libraries and this combination on this specific platform, I get an error and I don't understand it. And then you look at it and you're like, I can't even reproduce this error. Like I can't even compile half the libraries, and the platform is not something I have. So if you want to open an issue, always remember to minimize your tests to something that the maintainers can also reproduce, because then they can actually fix the bug. Otherwise, they're just gonna leave the issue open forever and say like, can't reproduce, sorry, not gonna fix it. A similar situation is when you're saying there's a new issue coming up. If you tell them exactly when it happened, it'll make it their lives easier, because now they can just look at the few changes that happened around when it happened, and try to find the bug there. So in general, just be aware of the priorities of the contributors to a project, and take care that you're not putting more work on them, because that's just going to backfire on you, because then nothing will happen. Similarly, if somebody promises you, we are going to release something next week or in a month or in a year or something, any deadline anybody provides is, well, I'm saying it's a lie here on the slide, but it's not something that's guaranteed, especially not in open source, because let's be honest, all these people are volunteers. They spend the time they can on it, and it's not that they are being paid to work full time on this, which kind of brings us to the next topic, money. I mean, if you're a volunteer and you're working on something, you're just spending the amount of time that you're happy with on it. But imagine if you could work on the thing, the open source thing that you love, and you get paid for it. So you don't have to have a separate job next to this. You're not draining your 6 hours of effective work every day before you start doing open source stuff, but you're doing the 6 effective hours a day on the open source stuff. And there's different ways to do that. The easiest way is usually to sponsor the maintainers without any other obligations. For example, with GitHub sponsors, it's basically a 2 or 3 click thing to throw some money at a developer to say, thank you, I love what you're doing, I'm using your library, make more of that. The other thing, if you want to give a more steady solution, is sometimes to hire the maintainers to work on this library and or project. And if there's just not enough maintainers, you might be also paying people to become maintainers and to join a project from the outside. So you're growing the set of maintainers, and instead of just giving the maintainers more resources. And taking all these 3 topics back to the Rust project, there's actually work in progress here that is really, really exciting. So recently, a lot of people have been hired to work on the compiler or related libraries. And some of these, I'm writing 10 FTE here, full-time equivalent, which is not 10 people, because some people work on it 50% of their time, some work 100%, some work on it 20%. There's a difference here between different developers, but generally people are allowed to work on the Rust compiler in their work time. And this is a really, really, really good way to make sure that the project stays alive. And one thing that just happened yesterday, or was announced yesterday, is, for example, that the crates.io team, which was usually providing the crates.io website and making sure that everybody could get the libraries that they wanted, that was completely made up of volunteers before. There was an on-call volunteer. So they were available in the middle of the night if the website went down or anything got a hiccup. And volunteers were rotating between each other to make sure that always someone there. And recently, this is now a paid team. So there's people getting paid to do that. And that makes is a huge relief for all these volunteers who can now concentrate on just making crates.io the best experience, instead of also having to spend all their time like around a laptop to be sure that they can fix it if something goes wrong. The other great thing when we're talking about resources is that currently we're developing a cloud machine or several cloud machines where people will be able to SSH into and compile the Rust compiler in there and debug it and test it and everything. And they'll have many, many cores to run all of this on. So they don't have to run it on their 4 or 8 core machine at home. They can just send it off on the SSH machine and run it as many times as they want, and don't have to wait around for half an hour to get the entire test suite done. And the third thing is that's been slowly been happening over the last years is that people are getting sponsored via GitHub sponsors. And I made an entire page for this because these are the sponsors that I found in no particular order, just the order that I found them in. By browsing a bunch of Rustaceans GitHub sponsors web pages. So it's really cool that companies are starting to sponsor here. Although a few are still eliminating red tape to be sponsoring people, because it's not always that easy if you're a really, really big company. Sometimes it actually appears that hiring is easier than sponsoring, which is kind of amusing, but yeah. So pulling this all back to me, because I'm holding this talk and I said it's very biased. So this entire talk is about my experiences with open source and the people that I've interacted with. So let me put this in scope. I've been working between 2016 and 2020 on a PhD and on Rust. And I've basically been working 10 hours a day, often working weekends. And there's always a huge spike around Christmas when I was contributing to the Rust compiler. And I was already planning my Rust exodus because this was just not sustainable, especially not with like family life and stuff. So I got this year a job working at Amazon where I'm working on the Rust compiler full time, and I've actually real weekends now. This is really cool because I'm doing the same work as I was doing before, but I'm getting paid for it. So I can do this work during the week, just like a regular job, and don't have to spend every waking minute on working on this stuff. And the cool thing about being employed, especially if you're employed in Europe, is you get parental leave and you get other things like part-time. And this would not have been possible if I would have done this in parallel to a regular job, because while I would get all these benefits for the regular job, these benefits don't exist for my volunteer work. And I would have to plan this all myself. And basically, yeah, that's why I was already considering exiting. But now I don't have to, which is really cool. So small note, I practiced this presentation over the weekend. So it's not always just working during the week, but obviously I still love all these projects and we're really excited about it. So I'm still pushing where I can. Anyway, summarizing the entire talk, pay your developers, respect your developers' time, try to help simplify their lives. And in the case of the Rust Foundation, it's really, really cool because its main mission is to support maintainers and basically do all these 3 steps on top. Well, they're not paying developers directly, but they're making sure that developers are getting jobs or getting sponsored. So yeah, this is things are happening here, and I've seen similar things happen in other communities, open source communities. So things are looking better, and there's lots of work to still be done, but we can look forward to the future. So thanks for listening.